Welcome back, everybody, to Battle of the Ballads. We are reuniting after what feels like an eternity because I missed you, gentlemen.
It
Joseph
has been an
Gregory.
eternity.
I think we need to start by congratulating Joseph on getting married, and I believe
It
you were married
happens.
by Rev Dilcox, were you not?
Of course.
The one and only. So, props to you, my friend. Congrats on the nuptials.
Thank you.
And
Thank you.
It's
How
now
many people cried in front of everyone that day, Joe?
At least three of us.
That's how it should be. But I know Amanda's had her time with you, but now it's time for the people to have you back. So welcome back. And we had some responses this week. We're in the year 2000 now, guys. We have
In the year 2000.
we have come a very long way. We've journeyed through 16 years of music so far. And we had some feedback from the audience this week. None that really helped me shorten my list any. So I'm really hoping that as we progress, you guys help me shorten my list here. But to kick things off, Sherry Nutter Timothy, I know I didn't tag you and you made note of that. I know you've been a routine listener of ours this whole time. It's not that I didn't want to tag you. It's that Facebook said I had tagged too many people. So tag you're it. I'm starting with you because the algorithm screwed ups. So she gave us Hybrid Theory, Linkin Park, the whole damn album. It's hard to knock that. Bent from Matchbox 20, Breathless from the Chorus, absolutely Story of a Girl from 9 Days. And she said it's just an amazing year for music because it's Britney, bitch. Jessica Steyateki gave us Independent Women from Destiny's Child, Bent from Matchbox 20, Sorry Miss Jackson from Outkast, which I've been listening to that album quite often recently. Seamus Gillespie gave us a respectfully submitted list of hip-hop selections. Bombs Over Baghdad, Outkast, Annie Up, MOP, Shake Your Ass, Mystical, anything off Supreme Clientele from Ghostface, and he reiterated anything. Jeremiah Perry Hill gave us Fill Me In from Craig David and Sandstorm from The Rude. Ellen Sadler, she narrowed it down to 13 songs for us, gents. Surprisingly, and I pointed this out to her, there was no Celine, and I think it crushed her a little bit and broke her heart. But when she comes on in 2004, she'll be able to tell us a little bit about that. She was Beautiful Day, YouTube, Breathless from the Chorus again, It's My Life by Jovi, Party Up in Here, DMX, I Hope You Dance, Leanne Womack. She had to squeeze that country in there. It's Gonna Be Me from NSYNC, Desert Rose from Sting, Shape of My Heart from Backstreet Boys, Who Let the Dogs Out from the Baha Men, Kryptonite by Three Doors Down, Oops, I Did It Again from Britney, All the Small Things from Blink, and Against All Odds, Mariah Carey featuring the one and only Westlife. Love me some boy bands. Now, Jeff Warden, who is actually, and it seems like we brought this up a long time ago, our 2001 guest. I feel like we talked about that so long ago, and now we're finally here. He said, in the rock world, we got Smooth, which is the driving force behind Santana's Supernatural, winningest album in Grammy history. Then popular Latin style and Santana's classic guitar style, mixed with Rob Thomas's vocals, was fantastic. Linkin Park, One Step Closer, Three Doors Down, Kryptonite, Blink with All the Small Things. 9 Days with Story of a Girl, NSYNC, It's Gonna Be Me, Britney with Oops, I Did It Again, Nelly with Country Grammar, Destiny's Child with Jumpin'. And he said he's got to give his support to Eminem, Real Slim Shady. And he said the performance of the VMAs is what helped Eminem catapult into the stratosphere and turned him into one of the top rappers for the decades. Adrian Costello Solik, she said Stan, period. There's always such an obvious first choice for her. Kelly Susie, I think she was kind of mad at us for this one, but it's not our fault. There was no REM this year. We do apologize. She has no entry because no REM. And Paul Brenner gave us Coldplay Yellow. So that's the recap from the audience take. And I was really genuinely hoping that they're going to help me cross stuff off my list. And I think I only took off 4 or 5. It's difficult. Nice choices. Very eclectic. I think as I replied to Jeff in one of the comments, this is probably where the music started to fuse and people started listening to like everything because there was a little something for everybody and a lot of stuff. I remember my metalhead friends listening to like freaking 9 Days and crap like that, just because there's a little something for everybody. So solid list. But Greg, and I've missed this feature, you have some debuts for us.
I do indeed have some debuts, and I know I'm missing some, but I tried to just people that made some kind of impact culturally or personally. So the first one, Explosions in the Sky, a band I kind of would listen to at the time, but they were very much an early 2000s indie band, which is the period we're into. In fact, this album, only 300 copies originally released on CDR. It's been re-released a couple times since then, but I just remember mp4.com and someone referring to them as like an MP4 band, which is just kind of hilarious because that same said person had music on MP4. So the East Siders, more appropriately called Snoop Dogg, presents the East Siders, a one and done group. This album got some critical acclaim, but this was fresh off Snoop joining No Limit Records with Master P and kind of trying to start the thing Dre did before him and Master P did, where they branch off and have their own folks. But I think like Warren G produced one of the tracks, Nate Dogg appeared on one of the tracks, so he kind of brought these young guys and then filled them with all his old West Coast friends. Anyway,
that was also the start of Snoop doing whatever the fuck he wants, where the genre didn't matter. He just reinvented himself every week.
Yes. Three Doors Down, their debut album was this year. I know we've kind of avoided soundtracks, and this one's a touchy one, but Together, their debut album, and their second and final album were all in 2000. Beanie Siegel, his debut album.
Yes.
Dashboard Confessional. The rapper Trina, who had a moment in 2000, she released one. Disturbed's debut album, and this used to be the album I would take naps to, oddly enough. Flogging Molly, still a big punk touring band. Sean Paul, his debut album, and unfortunately we don't get rid of him ever. He will be around until the end of time. Pink's debut album, Reliant K, which was kind of, I don't know for your generation, Joe, but back on Messina, Reliant K was one of those bands everyone listened to.
Yes.
Yeah, because we had a Christian youth center in our small towns downtown, and Reliant K being a Christian punk band, that was big with them, but it just kind of spread through everyone with their like infectious pop punk. So
I remember I saw them with like MXPX, and it wasn't until years later I found that they were a religious band even.
Yeah,
not one of their better albums, honestly. I looked through it, I was like, none of these songs resonate with me.
No, their next one's honestly where they hit big, but they debut album was definitely worth mentioning. The Yin Yang Twins, like there's nothing I think really super recognizable mainstream on this one, but is the first Yin Yang Twins, 9 Days, one of the better debuts of this year, followed by Dynamite Hack, an album I absolutely love.
Yes.
Coldplay's debut album, I really loved Coldplay in high school, and about this album, like Yellow was everywhere, but I didn't enjoy it as much re-listening to it the other day.
It's because Chris Martin's voice puts everyone to sleep. It's like an elephant trying.
No, I'm with Greg. There's only like one track, Shiver. I love that song. There's only like one song off that album. I'm like, yeah, there's some tracks in there.
I almost put Shiver on, but knowing you still really like that song, I left it off. But Coldplay, my dear friend Lauren, she at this time had planned her funeral song to be another guy we'd gone to high school with, and a guy Joe has had some run-ins on the Ultimate Field, our buddy Phil, to play the piano and sing a version of Yellow for her funeral. And something about Yellow being played by a friend being like the ultimate funeral song, it really is. And Lauren's always had a brilliant mind, and that is one of the more brilliant things.
That's pretty spectacular.
Yeah. Killswitch Engaged, their debut album, and very related in the same genre, Jill Scott's debut album as well. An important debut album for the Dilcox Boys, Wheatus.
Hell yeah.
Then Little Bow Wow, and when he switches to Bow Wow, I will list him again in the debut albums.
So we're gonna go from Bounce With Me to the next version of Bow Wow.
Yeah. Good Charlotte's debut album. Fozzy from Canadian pro wrestler Chris Jericho, who Joe has seen live. He's seen Fozzy.
Of course.
He may have seen Jericho live too. I don't know, but he's seen Fozzy live. What a piece of right-wing crap that guy is now. Linkin Park, and I put this one on here, but we talked about it, of course, I believe in 99 when the Japanese import was released. So I couldn't remember, because it's been so long, if we listed tracks off that album or if we just talked about My December.
We really just talked about My December.
Okay, so when I do my list, my short list, I won't have Linkin Park on there because I couldn't remember. but obviously that whole album could be listed. It's just a phenomenal album.
I never counted a song off that album. That album is one song to me. Like that's it. It's just one song.
That's one of the reasons we're going to get into a couple albums this year that were hard for me to take just one, which has happened a few times, but this year there's a few of like my first or second favorite albums from artists, and a few of my least favorite album from artists too, oddly enough. Nelly Furtado's debut album was this year, and then rapper off of Rhymes Sayer, Brother Ali, his debut album. Nothing I particularly love off this debut album, but the next one, which I think is in 2002, is just like a straight banger, which kind of contributes to we've got a couple debut albums that I really love in here, but Brother Ali, like having a weaker first album, kind of contributes to what we've seen in years past. But that's what I know is for debuts that really stuck out. But there were a lot of albums released this year, and honestly, like Mystical would have slipped through my mind if it wasn't mentioned in the short list. Not my favorite track off that album, but it's an album I would have totally forgotten about. So,
well, it was difficult because this was around the time where the mixtapes took off again, and so everybody was on these labels. Like a lot of the hip hop artists, their songs came out 2 years before their albums came out, and so it's like we already had a lot of these tracks, and I remember going through the list of this. I'm like, oh, this is not new, but it's when it came out as a single for that artist on that album. And so there's a lot, this is where shit starts to get tricky because the video comes out long before the song's on the radio. Like all this stuff comes into play. Thanks, Carson Daly, who Greg did a beautiful spot on in our last episode. Now, Mary Joseph, as we move into 2000 here, what's your list look like? I'm hoping it helps me pare mine down because I'm at 3 pages and I don't want to be. So what do you have for us?
So this one was tough. Like Gregory mentioned, there was so much music released in 2000. It took me a while to get through. And again, my process is I go through all of the albums released that year, which I do know I may miss some singles if they never make it to an album at some point. I also skip pretty much anything that's recorded live because generally it's stuff that's already been previously released and they're just re-recording it.
Right.
And compilations because you already had it once. I don't need to list you twice. But I think as I was going through and I was making my list, I'm like, I like some hip hop and rap, but it really doesn't break my list, like top my list. And I'm like, man, people are going to be mad because I know I'm skipping like really good music. I'm like, nah, it's not one of the things I listen to. But I did make it my normal 28, 25, and then my top 3. So this one was really tough. There's a couple that I couldn't quite decide. So we'll just go through it. Together, as Gregory mentioned, they actually released both their albums this year. Together is a movie and a TV show and a band I've always really liked. I'm still waiting for them to reunite, which has been talked about numerous times. But off the first album, You Plus Me Equals Us, Calculus, I think really the first one that came off that movie. And then off the second album, actually Regular Guys in that one too, I think. Nope, Regular Guys off of Together Again. So off the second album, Regular Guy and Five Gather, because that song always makes me laugh. Screaming Infidelities, the best dashboard song, came off of their debut. Disturbed, this one was tough. I have both Stupefy and Down with the Sickness. Nickelback I included. They probably would have been my first cut if I had to, but Leader of Men.
That's the only Nickelback song I like.
I get it.
That was off the State, the only album of Nickelback's I like.
I don't personally have anything against them. I have Silver Side Up. It was bought for me for a birthday.
What's weird for me about them is they were better in Canada. I hate to say it, but like listening to them on the edge, it'd be like, oh yeah, this works. And then when it's like they crossed over to the States, it's like it was a totally different band to me for some reason.
No, I get it. NSYNC, Bye Bye Bye. And one of the things I noticed, some of the groups, like the pop groups, this year I think is where they kind of started going downhill. The Boys to Men album, there's not. I know somebody listed Shape of Your Heart or Shape of My Heart. I didn't like anything off that. Backstreet Boys, the Spice Girls album. Yeah, the Spice Girls album that was released this year, I couldn't name a single song off of it, honestly.
This is the one post Jerry, right?
I think so.
Yes, it's when she left because she was doing her solo album that I think, wasn't it Sid Vicious or Johnny Rotten was funding?
Yes.
Yeah.
So you're not going to see much of the pop groups, but there's a few pop artists still on here. Newfound Glory released both their debut album and a second album this year, because their debut album was From the Screen to Your Stereo,
Yep.
which is the cover album. And off of that one, I really love both the Neverending Stories theme and Everything I Do for You. The actual first studio album, for me, there's nothing notable on it, but their second studio album, there are some things I really like. Cypress Hill released Superstar twice this year, rock and rap. So Superstar's on there. Take your pick. I like them both. Here's a whole album I included. A-Teens, ABBA Generation, mostly because it was a thing. Like it still baffles me that there was just a teen pop group that did nothing but ABBA covers. So if I'm going to pick one off of it, it's Gimme, Gimme, Gimme a Man After Midnight, obviously. Absolutely, 9 Days. Britney Spears, I have 3 of them listed off this album. Oops, I Did It Again, Stronger, and Lucky. I think they're all great songs. Off the Marshall Mathers LP, Stan and Real Slim Shady, not Shim Lady. Bright Eyes. So as I was researching some of these albums, I noticed this actually with Cursive, and I mentioned it to Gregory that I wanted to mention. I'm a sports fan, and one of the things about sports is people make up stats about everything. They've run the ball this well in a stadium when it's above 80 degrees, or whatever the case may be. Under both the Cursive album this year and the Bright Eyes album, they are the 31st release by Saddle Creek Records and the 32nd release by Saddle Creek Records. And I'm just like, why does that need to be a counting number? Those are not significant milestones. And I just thought that was really funny.
We're going to get into it when I talk about Bright Eyes and Cursive, but it was a good year for Saddle Creek release.
Oh, I agree. But off that Bright Eyes, I'm going to go with Movement of a Hand. Sister Hazel, I threw this one on a lot for Amanda. She's the only person I know that can name more than one Sister Hazel song. But Your Winter off of this album.
Good for her.
Here's to Tonight, Eve 6. The best Shaggy album of this year. Hope off of Hot Shot. Breathless, The Cores. Every time I see the title, I have to sing it. Fuel, both Hemorrhage and Bad Day. I have Five for Fighting, Superman. Green Day. I couldn't decide. This one was tough. I ended up going with Warning, I think, is my choice off of.
That was mine as well.
Limp Bizkit. I don't much listen to Limp Bizkit anymore, but when they were big, they were massive. And we listened to them quite a bit. And this album had, this one was Chocolate Starfish and the Hot Dog Flavored Water, and had both Rollin' and My Way on it. Nelly Furtado, who Gregory mentioned as a debut, I'm Like a Bird was this year. Fatboy Slim, the only song I can name from them, Weapon of Choice, mostly for the video because Christopher Walken's dancing through it and it's amazing. And then Life, Our Lady Peace was this year.
Yep.
So it's kind of the short list. Even trying to narrow it down to like my cutoffs or my in the runnings, I couldn't do it. So I had both Wheatus and Bare Naked Ladies tied for my number 3 runner-up. And really, you could take your pick. Wheatus, I love the entire album. Sunshine, Teenage Dirtbag, A Little Respect, an Erasure cover. Any really of those could be there. It's amazing. And then off the Bare Naked Ladies album, probably my choice is Tonight Is the Night I Fell Asleep at the Wheel, but also Falling for the First Time and Pinch Me are off that album, and those songs both slap.
I had Pinch Me listed.
It's so good. Number 2 runner-up is Three Doors Down. Probably go with Loser, although Kryptonite could be in that spot for me as well. Number one is the Matchbox 20 album, literally the whole album. But Bent would be my number one. If you said If You're Gone or Mad Season, I wouldn't argue with those choices either.
Great album.
But my pick for the year has to be Linkin Park. I think I've told the story before on the podcast. Chester's death was the first celebrity death that ever made me cry. I was so thankful I got a chance to see him perform with Stone Temple Pilots. It was the first CD I owned, and I have a lot of fond memories connected to this album. And again, this is kind of dealer's choice. Pick one of the 11. I'm cool with that. But With You is probably my choice off that album. So that's my song of the year, With You by Linkin Park.
That's a fantastic list, and that, to be honest, a fantastic song. It just really is. So, Gregory, we come to you, my friend, and I have a feeling we're going to get some Saddle Creek action up in here.
We are definitely going to get some Saddle Creek action up in here. I'm going to start with, since Joe was just mentioning how big Limp Bizkit was for us growing up, this was the album when I quit liking Limp Bizkit. I did not like this album at all, but when the Wonder Years, I mentioned they'd done the year I saw them for Halloween, did Limp Bizkit as their cover set, and when they played Rolling, it was the one song, it didn't matter if you grew up on Limp Bizkit or not, the crowd went nuts. But I did not throw Rolling. There is like a second version of Rolling on that album with the Urban Assault Vehicle mix, and it features DMX, Method Man, and Redman.
Yes.
And I picked that specifically because there's going to be a theme in some of the tracks I pick. But yeah, so that would be my Limp Bizkit song for that year. A lot of these are going to double up with Joe. Unlike Dan, I'm not going to downsize, but Three Doors Down, Kryptonite, and Loser, like I don't care how much they were played on the radio. They are great fucking tracks. You Plus Me Equals Us, Calculus is my favorite Together song, and knowing Joe loves Together so much more, it's the only one on here. Bad Touch, Bloodhound Gang, it is not a good song, but it was everywhere, and I loved it. I loved it back then, and it'll come into play later in the list too. Stupefy, Down with the Sickness, and Disturbed did a cover of Shout called Shout 2000 on that album.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I don't want to pick a song that's a cover necessarily, but it's going to happen quite a few times on the list.
Yes. Welcome.
Eels, It's a Motherfucker, and Mr. E's Beautiful Blues. And Mr. E's Beautiful Blues, I believe, was a bonus track on that album, Trippin' Daisies, and just another great album from Eels. They're all good from Eels. Pedro the Lion released 2 albums this year. Bad Thanks to Such Good People off the first album would be my list from my pick from Pedro the Lion. In Sync is my only boy band, much like Joe. Bye 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 and It's Gonna Be Me are just great tracks. Might be like 2 of the 3 best In Sync tracks off this album. As Joe said, like the Backstreet Boys album was garbage this year.
Did we lose Dan or just his video?
I don't know.
Still here.
Okay, he's still here. Just lost his video. Cool. Ice Cube released a pretty great album, Hello, which features Dre and MC Ren, so a mini NWA reunion. And then You Can Do It with Mac 10 and Miss Toy. Joe mentioned Newfound Glory, Everything I Do For You, and the Never Ending Story theme. My 2 favorite Newfound Glory tracks are both covers, and I'm okay with that. I did see.
Oh, your video's back, Dan.
All right, sorry, the storm is wild right now. Sorry.
So it's interesting. You know how much I love covers just in general. I think it started with that album. It's the first time I can really remember, like, I know there are songs that are covers, obviously, like you would never, like at the time I wouldn't have known though. Like I just thought those were the original artists when I heard them. This is the first one I was like, these are covers and I like them better. Like it was kind of the start for that, and it's still happening. I still have a number of covers I listen to every day.
You know what's wild? Whenever you mentioned Newfound Glory, is that was my last concert before the shutdown. Before like all of this happened, it was like 2 weeks before everything, and I saw them with Hawthorne Heights, and that was my last concert like 2 years ago now.
You said Hawthorne Heights, and I heard Hawthorne Wipes. So
that just sounds painful.
I think there's only one like original Newfound Glory track I like, but I do really enjoy their covers. And I did see them. Granted, my buddy Chirp won free tickets to see them after he'd already bought tickets to see them. So I was the only one who wanted a free ticket to Newfound Glory, which people are insane. They do put on a great live show, even for not being a fan of them. My favorite Del the Funky Homo Sapien song, If You Must, came out this year. This might be my least favorite Elliott Smith album that came out this year, but Son of Sam would be the best track off that. And although not the best 2-track combination, best 2-track titles are Everything Reminds Me of Her, followed directly by Everything Means Nothing to Me from Elliott Smith. I don't think those are the two best back-to-back tracks of the year. We'll get to that here soon. But for titles, best two-track titles. Joe, for you, I almost went best 3-track of the year, but I did not. I figured the title segment was ridiculous enough. Last Resort, Papa Roach. I think the only track off that album for Papa Roach I liked. Absolutely, Story of a Girl has been mentioned a couple times. Great song, fantastic video. Eminem with the Marshall Mathers LP. Stan Kim, The Way I Am. I think those, like, The Way I Am is somehow underrated off that album, and I don't know how.
It's my track.
Dynamite Hack, Dear Kate is my favorite off that album, but the Boys in the Hood cover to make it my 4th cover of the year. But the white boy alt rock groups covering hip hop for some reason always gets me, even though it shouldn't. Joe mentioned the Bright Eyes album. This is my favorite Bright Eyes album. I think I mentioned with the 2 that came out in 98 that my favorite is coming up. But this is my favorite album. I wanted to list the entire album, but I didn't want to not do that. I mean, what would have essentially been 3 times if I included Linkin Park, but wasn't sure where we fell on that. So Hala Hala Alai Hala, Center of the World, Sunrise Sunset, all 3 of those tracks. But like I said, Movement of a Hand too. Sorry, I thought I was leaving that off for a reason, but Joe mentioned it. I did a dance solo to this in high school and cried on stage. It was planned I would try to cry, but I really did cry, mostly because I screwed up. But this album just hits me still today. Why We Die, featuring DMX and Jay-Z off the Busta Rhymes album. Not a great Busta Rhymes album, but this is a good track. And of course, rest in peace, DMX. Quality Control, Jurassic 5.
Yes.
This is, I think, hands down the best Jurassic 5 track, hence the fact that these backpack rappers crossed over with this track. I think Fox had them on the Sunday NFL Countdown show at one point. In around this time, it may have been a couple years later, because I think that's what it took for this track to hit. But yeah, no, they were on Fox rapping. So Deftones, this album, White Pony, there was a stretch in my early 20s where every time I went to a bar, you were going to hear something off this track played on one of those internet jukebox things. But Change and House of Flies and Nice Party are fantastic. Everclear is wonderful. Mm-hmm. The Weaker Thans, a wonderful Canadian band, they released my favorite Weaker Thans album this year. But my favorite chords, Left and Leaving, which is the title track, and This Is a Fire Door, Never Leave Open, which Meryl of Best X took over Spin Magazine's Snapchat like maybe about a year ago and did a Q&A. And one of the things she mentioned, or their Twitch is what she took over. One of the things she mentioned was that this is one of her favorite songs of all time and how like it's one of the most well-written tracks of all time. And she is right. So I immediately sent a text to our buddy Buck about her giving credit to that song, and he loved it. And I think we were then both listening to the Weaker Thans for a couple hours. Ooh, featuring Redman.
Yes.
De La Soul. So second time I'm mentioning Redman with him being a featured thing. It wasn't me, Shaggy. The song was everywhere, and it's not close to the best track off the album, but it's my favorite track off the album. Crazy for This Girl, Evan and Jaron, which I thought for sure this would have been their debut album because no one heard of them before or after, but this was their second album. So
was it really?
Yeah.
No shit.
I know that song, but when I went through albums, I did not recognize The artist. I completely skipped that album. I was like, man, okay, great. Because I was like, I don't know who that is.
Yeah, I was like,
Funny.
man, I know those guys. I thought for sure this was going to be one of those like pop groups that was like one or done. Um, but I'm now tempted to go back and listen to more of them because
I was just thinking the same freaking thing.
this song haunted me for years. Like every crush I had for a couple years, I thought about this track. I think it was like it was this and Vertical Horizon. Those who I was thinking of when I was crushing. So um, now I've lost my track. Oh, Forget About It, featuring DMX, Method Man, and Redman. So second time I've mentioned Method Man, third for DMX and Redman. Back Where I Belong, featuring Ja Rule off the LL Cool J album, The GOAT.
Oh.
And I'm not a huge Ja Rule fan. You won't see anything off his album mentioned here, but when he's just doing a growling chorus for a better artist, I love it. I think that's why Ashanti kept having him on. But yeah, I love this LL Cool J album. It may be my fourth or fifth favorite LL Cool J album because he's got enough of them. But I do love this album. Mystical, Watch Yourself is my favorite album off that, or my favorite track off that album. I guess it's Danger, Watch Yourself, but yeah. Harvey Danger, who most of us think of as a one-hit wonder, but I absolutely love. This is my third favorite back-to-back tracks with You Missed the Completely, I Get the Point Exactly, and Authenticity, which third favorite back-to-back, but I mean my second favorite names of back-to-back tracks. Fuel, Hemorrhage in My Hands was my favorite Fuel song off that album. Green Day, Warning is my favorite Green Day album, and I know some people find that controversial, and some people can't stand that album, but this was also like the last great Green Day album for me. But Waiting and Macy's Day Parade are my two favorites off that. My best back-to-back tracks of this year, I Am Like a Bird, followed by Turn Off the Light. So coming off her debut album, like just two bangers back-to-back from Miss Furtado. Outcast, this album was everywhere, and it was so good. So fresh, so clean, Bombs Over Baghdad, and Humble Mumble with Erykah Badu. So it's kind of funny that they've got Sorry Miss Jackson, which is essentially about Erykah Badu's mother, and then she's featured on a track. So
yeah.
Joe mentioned Cursive. So this album, Domestica, is brilliant, and it's also a concept album. So I didn't want to pick any of the tracks off this because it really is a concept album after his first divorce, which was that year, that being Tim Kaiser, the frontman of the next band is also Tim Kaiser, but the frontman of Cursive. So I didn't want to separate any of this because this is a theme for Kaiser that happens with one of his other projects, The Good Life, is basically essentially about a year. It's called Album of the Year, and it is about a year of drunken tomfoolery with a woman. So that one's not quite a theme album, but it kind of is. But all of the Good Life albums are kind of a theme album. All his solo albums are kind of a theme album. But also the Good Life released an album that year on top of Cursive. So Kaiser was busy, and he also is on the Bright Eyes album. So Tim Kaiser was on so many of those Saddle Creek releases that year. But from that Good Life album, Your Birthday Present and An Acquaintance Strikes a Chord, which it would be my second favorite back-to-back tracks of the year, but Your Birthday Present is just brilliant. It might be my favorite Good Life song. I don't know. Although Joe playing Album of the Year on his guitar might be my favorite Good Life cover. Her Space Holiday had an album that year, Snake Charmer and Doctor and the DJ, my two favorite tracks off that. I think it was a double album. So I did 5 for Joe because I thought these were the best. The only one I mentioned twice is Your Birthday Present from The Good Life, only because it was part of the 2-song run, so it had to get mentioned there too. Oops, I Did It Again, Britney Spears, almost Song of the Year. The Real Slim Shady, almost Song of the Year. Not my favorite track off that album, but it's, I think, the most Eminem release. And there's just something about, like, when he throws Christina Aguilera on blast for mentioning he was cute but married.
Yes.
What a childish thing to do, but a very Eminem thing to do. I remember a couple years ago when he released that one album that not all the critics loved. So he released a whole fucking album ripping critics to shred. Like somehow the man will be permanently like a child, but at the same time,
Genius.
he like abdicates, I mean, in the most childish way ever, but he advocates for gay marriage while dissing Tom Green. So, and I think that's just the Eminem experience in a whole. He's somehow like a supreme child, but a very open one. And this song, plus the video on MTV's, or the track, the performance on MTV's Music Awards, I think was the last great. That's not true. Miley Cyrus on the Wrecking Ball.
Yes.
But so this is the second to last great performance for the VMA. Dirtbag by Wheatus, that track was everywhere and it's brilliant and it still resonates. And then my track of the year would be Something Vague from Bright Eyes. It just hits me every time and it always will. So that it was a three-way battle between Eminem, Britney, and Bright Eyes, but I figured since that was my favorite Bright Eyes album, like how do I not make something song of the year off that? So there we go.
You know what's interesting? I mean, awesome choices. Bright Eyes is one of those groups that I don't think anybody, like there's a time in your life when you go back and revisit Bright Eyes because you've never heard of them, but there's like some sort of music cycle that takes you there. Because I know so many people that I've encountered who, you know, like I'll be listening or whatever, like, what's that? But it's like they start with Elliott Smith and then work backwards and all of a sudden they end up like Bright Eyes. Like it's this weird life course for a lot of individuals. So it's kind of cool to be talking about them right now.
Well, and the next album would be Lifted, which I love. And that's the album I discovered Bright Eyes. So thankfully, the editors of Rolling Stone magazine, including that in a lot of year-end lists before he started getting some mainstream cover. Like I discovered Bright Eyes somehow fairly early in his run because I think really, what's the one that everyone covers that's on weddings? Is it Time of My Life or whatever? That one off of one of the upcoming albums. That's where everyone kind of starts getting into Bright Eyes. And that might be my least favorite Bright Eyes album.
Well, I remember there was like this patch in my life where folks started getting into like singer-songwriters and stuff. And it's like, hey, have you heard Bright Eyes? I'm like, yeah, I have. And it's like they discovered it was just all of a sudden people listen to it. So it's kind of cool. So awesome list. I was able to narrow mine down a little bit. And this was a year where some of these albums were just everything for me. So again, I go unnoticed. Ender Will Save Us All, Swiss Army Romance from Dashboard, Screaming Infidelities was said. Swiss Army Romance is one of my favorite albums. Probably my favorite Dashboard album. Angel from Shaggy is actually my Shaggy pick for that year. I do really actually enjoy that song. And I don't know if folks know, but Shaggy did an album with Sting about 3 years ago, and it's a banger from start to finish. Oh, speaking of albums that are bangers, Gregory, remind me when we get to 2021, I owe you a giant thank you, and I will send you a gift card for beer because Gregory introduced me to an album that doesn't fit this generation, but holy shit, has changed my whole summer.
I love that it's an album by an artist everyone knows. I don't know if we're waiting until 2021 to mention it, but it is not a big surprise. I didn't let you in on some secret underground artist.
I had no idea. Well, you know, I'm going to let everybody at home know in case you want to change your summer for the better. It's Sob Rock from John fucking Mayer. And I shouldn't like it as much as I do, but I haven't stopped listening to it. But you showed me, 2 weeks ago? God,
yeah, I think it was while I was making the cheesecake for Joe and Amanda's wedding. I was listening to Sob Rock and I was just like, oh, and I'd read the review on paste.com. I don't know if Paste Magazine exists, but I still love the Paste website. And I usually go there for music reviews, and there was like a great review of the John Mayer. And I'm like, okay. And I listened to like the John Mayer trio, his jazz stuff and everything. So you might not know this just by listening to the singles, but Mayer is a phenomenal artist.
Oh, yeah.
And he also is kind of funny. He's a dickhead, but he's funny. And so the fact that he did a whole 80s rock album as a joke, and it's really brilliant, and the titles are really funny, the cover's just fantastic. It's both a great album and a great joke, and that needs to be appreciated because it's also not like he did something like the Bloodhound Gangs from this year where all they do is joke rock rap. It was just a legitimate album that is also a joke. Like it wasn't a comedy album. It wasn't Stephen Lynch doing the bowling song, which is a great track, but
it made my heart smile. And I think everybody should listen to Sob Rock because it's been, my Spotify account might just blow up if I listen to it again. So Angel from Shaggy, Last Time and Innocent from Fuel. Love both. My Three Doors Down track was actually Be Like That, which was featuring American Pie. And I remember sitting by the bonfire with friends just listening to that track on repeat after that came out because all of a sudden, teen angst, American Pie, here we are, and all that bullshit. But great stuff sitting in the cornfield of the bonfire with Three Doors Down playing. Stuck in a Moment You Can't Get Out of and Walk On from U2. If You're Gone from Matchbox 20. Boss of Me from They Might Be Giants. Huge They Might Be Giants fan. Great track, great song for Mouth in the Middle. No Name Face from Lifehouse came out that year. And I love that album from start to finish. It had Breathing, Trying, Hanging by a Moment, Six Cycle Carousel, Everything, which was featured on Smallville. And as a result of that, became my friend's wedding song. They danced the same song as Lana and Clark. Broken Home, Last Resort from Papa Roach. We've already talked about Hybrid Theory. I can name every track on there, throw a dart. So this I Promise You from NSYNC. Bob the Builder had a track, Can We Fix It? And you know what? He says, yes, we can, but I feel like there's quite a bit he can't in today's economy. Can't Fight the Moonlight, Leanne Rimes. The Cha-Cha Slide, which as a DJ who's done so many weddings, that song replaced Achy Breaky Heart and so many other songs. I am so thankful for DJ.
Nothing will ever replace Achy Breaky Heart.
I am so thankful for DJ Casper for coming along with that one. Counting the Days from Goldfinger, such an amazing freaking track, and it makes every playlist that I have. Loving Me from Nelly is my favorite Nelly song. It's kind of the last song nobody listens to on that album, but it's such a great track. Ex-Girlfriend, Simple Kind of Life from No Doubt. The only Fish song that I actually like, Farmhouse, came out that year. That is the only Fish song I like and can tolerate.
Farmhouse, actually, I'm not a Fish fan, but Farmhouse is good. That album's probably the best Fish album because it's the most album-like. I never owned it, but I borrowed it from a friend, and then another friend stole it for my house. So
I think I saw
that CD went around my friend group. So
I almost included Farmhouse, but
there was a time in my life when I tried to, as the 15-year-old I was growing a beard, tried to do the Craig David. So 7 Days and Rendezvous off of Craig David's Born to Do It. Made the list for me. I love that album. Our British R&B hip hop gentleman. Follow Me from Uncle Kracker. I hated it at the time because it was everywhere, but now it comes on. I'm kind of like in dad mode, just like in my, family mobile, just bop my head to it. I can give it some love. He Loves You Not from Dream. They need some respect. Put some respect on Dream's name. They were okay.
I somehow missed that Dream album was that year.
I listened to it more than I'd like to admit over the last 2 weeks. I could not ask for more from Edwin McCain. That's one of those tracks that always gets me. I Just Want to Love You. Give It to Me from Jay-Z. I Want to Be With You by Mandy Moore. And I think that she does want to be with me. She's the only musician to ever DM me. And I will take that to the grave. And I have it printed in my office. So yes, I want to be with you too, Mandy Moore. Sometime we'll talk. I'm Moving On and Praying for Daylight from Rascal Flatts. I don't like much country, but I do enjoy those two songs. Just Another Day in Paradise, another country song from Phil Vassar. And this was a time in my life where I finally opened up to other music genres, being like, there might be some decent stuff out there. And I found some that I liked. That's the only country that's left on it. So music and What It Feels Like for a Girl from Madonna. I don't really like them, but it was this, she started working with the younger women musicians and kind of collaborating, bringing them up and things like that. It was interesting to watch. So I think it's got its value there. Never Had a Dream Come True from S Club 7. When I was doing community service at the Goodwill and the VOA for many infractions, that song was the only playlist like in those shops. And so I can probably sing every word like in my sleep.
S Club 7 was a show as well, right?
Yes. I believe it was, yes.
Okay.
Because Jessica, the younger of our two sisters, still older than me, she loved S Club 7. She watched the show and had both albums they released this year. They released both S Club as an album and 7 was the title of the second album.
So they got really creative with that.
I knew there was 2 albums that year and that it was a show. I did not realize those were the names. That's brilliant. Yes. So the trend of 2000 was pop TV shows as well as guys really stuck on women, which is always the theme of pop music. So
I had No More Baby, I'ma Do It Right from 3LW. Which coincidentally I was actually just listening to like right before we came on. No One from Cold, one of the few songs from them I like. Nobody Wants to Be Lonely and She Bangs from Ricky Martin. he made a big transition from Stone on General Hospital to this musician who just shook his hips everywhere and shook that bonbon. So I'll take that. My favorite Britney track is Lucky. It always will be. Love that song. Had my Britney shirt on earlier at the gym, actually, and I love those looks. Renegades of Funk from Rage Against the Machine. They put out a shit album. That was a solid track off it. Riding with the King from BB King and Eric Clapton. Yeah, Eric, but BB King is just a god, and that album was so good. But that track actually put blues back on the radio, and I have a lot of respect for that. Put It On Me from Ja Rule. In Repair from Our Lady Peace. I know Life Was Said. In Repair is actually my favorite track off of Spiritual Machines. Right Now from SR71. Another one of those just angsty songs that you have to include. Michael Jordan from Five for Fighting. I actually really love that Americatown album. I think it's really good. The songwriting on it's just fantastic, and it didn't get a lot of airplay. It was their second single, but it's solid. The General, Two Coins, and Out Loud from Dispatch. I love Dispatch, one of my favorite bands. I know they don't get a lot of love from a lot of people, and they're one of the jam bands. I love them. How Does It Feel from D'Angelo? Great song. And to round that out is Want You Bad from The Offspring. Which a lot of this, American Pie kind of that soundtrack gave a lot of people the spotlight. So I didn't have a top 5. I had a top 6. Again, from Lenny Kravitz, simply because that was the transition in his career where he kind of went somewhere else. But it's also one of those tracks that I hated when it came out, but I love it when I hear it now, because it just represented a different version of Lenny. The Lighthouse's Tale from Nickel Creek. I don't think many people know who Nickel Creek is. I'm not a big fan of a lot of their stuff, but this is a song that tells a story, and it's one that I didn't know when it came out. I didn't know until 10 years after it came out. I found it. I fell in love with it, and I encourage anybody to listen to it. Fill Me In by Craig David. As I mentioned, I wanted to be Craig David at one point. It was never going to happen, but God, he had the best beard line. Try Again from Aaliyah. She could have been something just so spectacular. Constantine from Something Corporate. And My December from Linkin Park, because it finally made the hidden tracks on the American album in this year. For me, it really actually came down to Constantine from Something Corporate and My December from Linkin Park. And I had to go with My December because it's probably in my top 5 tracks of all time. But it was a tough decision. And even nudging Aaliyah and Craig David out there was kind of tough. So My December is what I settled on for my track of the year.
I'm a little annoyed because there are a couple you mentioned that I somehow missed. Because again, there was a lot of music released this year. I didn't realize that the first Something Corporate was released, Ready Break. For some reason, I was thinking that it was 2001. Anyone who knows me knows that I'm a massive Something Corporate fan, and I have been for many years.
So you'll tune into my episode where I'm interviewing Andrew McMahon in a couple weeks?
Are you interviewing Andrew McMahon?
Yeah.
Yeah, of course I will.
Awesome.
I love Andrew McMahon. I still follow him. When I started buying vinyls, my first vinyl was Andrew McMahon in the Wilderness.
Nice.
So I'm really pissed I missed that. But anyway, I mean, pick any.
Well, so
be on my list.
It really kind of looks at how you want to look at it. So that was on Ready Break, and that was like the original version of Constantine, and then they had their other albums and stuff like that. So it depends on how you look at it, because it wasn't even released until November of that year. So it was in between. It's just it happened to land that year, so.
Well, it's one of those.
I'm thinking of Audio Boxer was the one.
Which came out in 2001.
Yeah.
Yes.
Audio Boxer is the first one Wikipedia list. If you go to the Something Corporate Wikipedia article, which I just did, it lists it like in a blurb, but Audio Boxer doesn't get its own article, doesn't get like a highlighted thing. And the Something Corporate Wikipedia page doesn't just do a discography like most, because it talks more about Jack's Mannequin than it does like the Something Corporate album.
They just went gold today. Jack's Mannequin's everything in transit. But yeah, Ready Break. It was a great piece to put together. But I actually have that cassette from when I saw them in concert. It's kind of fun. But it's one of those like interpretation things. Which one do you count?
But Constantine didn't show up on the other ones. Like Constantine was on Ready Break, but does not show up on either Audio Boxer or Leaving Through a Window.
I believe it is on Audio Boxer.
I don't.
At least the re-release of Audio Boxer, because I remember getting that on iTunes. That's where I got it from for a friend's party.
It might be on the re-release, but I did just pull up the set list or the track list. It's not on Audio Boxer's original release.
It's not on the Spotify. Does that mean Constantine's not on Spotify at all? Because Ready Break is not on Spotify's album.
Oh,
interesting scandal.
So something corporate really went corporate and they erased their discography. Yes.
Because I didn't discover Constantine till after Audio Boxer, but yeah, it's definitely not on that album. So
yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Anyway, the other one you mentioned that I'm upset with myself that I missed was Lifehouse. Somehow I missed No Name Face when I was going through the album releases of that year.
Yeah, that was the interesting thing is I remember going through the year because we all use different sites. When I was going through like songs from 2000 and stuff like that, they had songs that were either released like in 97, there were songs that were released in 2004. So it's interesting, like you have to kind of vet it out. Like I spent way longer Googling this. I'm like, that doesn't sound right. Because I'm remembering this is when I started making playlists and mixtapes and burn CDs and our basketball warm-ups. And I'm like, I know for a fact these songs were not around then. So it's getting harder now as we enter into the 2000s. But I'm excited about it. And 2001 is a zany year. And there's yet another shift in music. So I'm really excited to get there with you gentlemen.
Now, real quick, because you made a gesture when you mentioned Eric Clapton. How much has how problematic an artist affected how you guys are looking at things now? Because Eric Clapton is one of, I think, 4 artists I didn't even bother looking at this year because either current comments or actions in the past. In fact, a debut album that directly involves Mandy Moore, I didn't mention because the guy's a piece of shit.
I left Ryan Adams off as well.
Yeah.
There are certain artists I've just deleted from my collection, blocked from my head, and I don't separate the art from the artist if they are a complete piece of shit. There's certain things I'll tolerate, certain things I won't. We all have that threshold, but there's some who just disappear for me. So I don't have a threshold. It's just if I get this gut feeling of like, I don't mention it. Like I didn't bring up Judith from Perfect Circle because fuck Maynard, like that kind of stuff. So
yeah,
there's just certain stuff that to me.
So that's 5 because I completely forgot about Maynard this year because I knew there was a reason I didn't look at the Perfect Circle album. And
yeah, so I look at everything taken into consideration. Some people atone, some people grow, and you got to look at that too. And others are just pieces of shit. So I tend to take it case by case, and it may not be consistent. It's just where I'm at in the moment.
Yeah, it's interesting because I know it came up with Manson. You made I left Ryan Adams off of like R. Kelly had an album this year, and fuck that guy. Like,
yep.
It just. And I don't think that's a bad thing. It's just also, we'll get into this more when we have to decide on the best song through this thing. But having recently heard the story about Sinead O'Connor's encounter with Prince, there's no way in hell Prince could be my song. So
I saw that, but then I saw like at the time, like there's so much, and I'm not just defending Prince. There was so much like to that, and I'm like, I really want to hear more about it because it's all left field, and there's a lot of shit from her book that people are like, what are you talking about? So it's interesting. And then I always believe first and backtrack later, do like the homework and all of that. And that's kind of where I'm at because that's not the only thing where people are like, what are you talking about? So,
the Prince story fits into other Prince stories.
It does.
Except for like, I don't know any other stories where Prince gets in a car and chases someone down, but at the same time, like I believe it.
So the idea of like him having somebody at his house and walking away and leaving them to fend for himself totally tracks. It's the rest that doesn't, because everybody, even as Grizzy, has been as talk how gracious he is. And then her book, which I also want to read because for years I've wanted Sinead to get like the mental health treatment that she needs. I mean, it's been obvious, and her family kind of abandoned her in a lot of stuff. It's interesting how it tracks in there, and her stories when asked about it has wavered, or not that it wouldn't, and not that that justifies anything. It's just a matter of I want to kind of do the backtracking of, all right, so this is what you said, and if that happened, that really freaking sucks. And not just with Prince, but with every other encounter she had in the industry to make her break, because it's clear that something happened.
Yeah, well, with the Prince one specifically, it's hard because the 3 people there were Prince, his brother, and Sinead O'Connor. But like, she lavishes how much she loves his brother, and that he was there, like he helped her.
Right.
So.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting, and we'll never know, unfortunately. But and I would never defend somebody who did something like that. It's just interesting to see how the various accounts of things track, like in her tales of, all right, and then it changes when she's asked about it, which is common. Not discrediting, it's just one of those things of like, where do you grapple with this sort of matter of going back, and is this her process of healing in a lot of ways in what she experienced? And so I'm curious to dive into those takes on the industry, because I think she's exposing a lot of things while working through a lot of things too. So it's definitely an interesting one.
Yeah, for me, it depends on how much I know, right? Because I knew there was a reason I looked at A Perfect Circle and was like, I couldn't remember if it was because I just don't. The music's fine. It's just not something I've ever really listened to. Same with Tool. Like I get it. There are a number of Tool songs that I know and I like, but it's never been something I just turn on myself.
Yeah.
So I couldn't remember if it was, I looked past it, because I've seen A Perfect Circle live. They were at a festival I was at, and that was before I had read the accounts of him being a piece of shit. But there's a lot of times, like with bands, I might not know individual people or associations, and so it just doesn't really register in my mind. But it's gotta be like, if someone's just an asshole, or if they're just not like a good person, it's different than being a piece of shit, right? Like Andrew McMahon, when he was young in his early days of music, was an asshole. But
I mean, like John Mayer's a freaking asshole, but I'll endorse his music till the day I die, because he's a musical genius. But it turns out that Prince was a scumbag and did all that shit. Then fuck him, and he's my favorite musician of all time. I have no problem with that. So that's what it's interesting for me, because I don't have anything consistent with it. It's just in the moment, I'm like, yeah, they're done. They're off my playlist.
But I think another part of it for me is how much of that person is the band, right? And so what I mean by that is that recently there have been some allegations. Amanda and I were talking about it, against the violin player in Dave Matthews Band, and he's been cut out of the band. And so I'm not going to not go to this concert with Amanda or not listen to Dave Matthews because there was a past member who they have cut ties with.
I think that's a bit different. It's typically when it's like the front person or the main musician kind of thing.
But if he's got writing credits or whatever, he's still potentially making money off this. So you're still supporting this individual potentially with royalties and stuff like that. But
check out the Comics Lounge talk with Paul today, and you'll see just how much they actually get paid on those royalties. His 10 cents is okay for the concert. It's fine.
Fair point.
It's you're fine there, but it's
and of course, I know a guy who says if the artist is problematic, download it illegally, so they're not getting money if the track's good. And I understand that, but like, how much are you like still like endorsing an artist when you play that track in front of other people? So it's
I will say, like, R. Kelly was one of my favorite musicians for a lot of years. TP2.com was one of my favorite albums, and
that was specifically the artist he was talking about with the Ignition remix.
So when shit hit the fan, I mean, obviously he's not on any of my stuff. I don't listen to, but I have friends who do, and I don't knock him for it. Whatever, it's music you're into,
and of course,
for me, it just makes me feel grimy. So I get it.
It's interesting where the bar is too, because with like Clapton, he came out as an anti-vaxxer and told people it's ridiculous they have to wear masks. Like, that to me is like more than enough for this guy who's a music legend to be written out, because you are literally encouraging spreading a disease that has killed millions. Like,
for me with him, it was one thing if he's like, because he's like, I'm not gonna play any shows unless they don't wear a mask, and that's where I'm like, all right, so you want to get all these people in a group together to help them slaughter each other. Like, if he was like, I don't believe in the vaccine, I'm not into this, whatever. Okay, cool, that's your opinion. I get everybody's got their own stance. But if you're intentionally trying to bring everybody together as a statement, that's where I'm like, all right, dude, fuck you. And I don't care what you've written. I don't care what you've done up until now. Like, that's just irresponsible, because
I didn't even know he had said that, honestly. I
love how in the dark you are, Joe. I wish there were all these artists where I'm like, I know nothing. I just got my headphones on. I'm good.
Yeah. And of course, like, Jericho is the same thing. Both him and his wife are very vocal, like, anti-maskers online. But the Fozzy thing is a joke more than anything, because none of us are listening to Fozzy. It is not a good band. So to me, it was just hilarious that professional wrestler Chris Jericho's had a band that fucking long.
Yeah.
And that Joe has seen them live. So like, that was a joke. Like, I would not endorse actually listening to Fozzy. I don't even watch the wrestling product that Jericho is part of because of Jericho. So like,
I look at the problematic stuff too in terms of like I won't knock somebody's matter of opinion or whatever. It's more of the actions on things for me. Like people say shit throughout their entire times. There's interviews where people are caught off guard. There's shit they do, but it's we look at the actions. You know, like if that Prince thing tracks and it's true, I'm like, fuck. I mean, that's a shit thing to do. You know, like I can't support that. You know, like so it's for me. It's very. I don't want to say it's what I want to believe or anything like that. It's more of like where does that go? Because there's often times where you hear these wild rock and roll stories, and I think at the end of the day, we can't like anybody who comes out of the '60s or '70s if you really think about it. But then what actually happened? We don't know. And that's not to discredit anybody. It's that there's 50 different versions of these stories coming out, especially with all the drugs involved and shit.
Well,
You know,
like,
so
it's not that Prince was even the most right of mine anyway. Like to him, it might have been a fun joke to hit her with a weighted pillow.
which is
Like
not fun for anybody.
It's not. He may have been thinking they were playing some kind of game because it feels like Prince very much like stayed in the mentality of a man child like his entire life. So
yeah, which is also problematic. You know, nothing justifies actions to me. So
no.
Especially in the field I'm in. So yeah, no, I totally get it. It's for me. It's
I do want to go back to something you said though, because you said like actions are more important than words, and I do understand that, but words can encourage some really shitty things, right? So like,
you mean like the insurrection in January that was encouraged by words? Like
I was gonna go to a lesser example, even just like taking the anti-vax standpoints, right? So like you've got people who are encouraging mass gatherings and saying the only way I'm going to do this is if there's no mask mandates. And then on the flip side, you have somebody like Kirk Cousins, again, different field. But I mean, football player doesn't personally want to get the vaccine, but in his interviews, he's like, you know what, I don't want to get the vaccine. It's not for me, but I'm going to follow all of the protocols. And he even made a joke about putting a plexiglass barrier around his desk, and they increased their quarterback room size, right, to accommodate that. And so that's a little bit different.
It's very different. That's very different. He's not inviting harm.
Yeah, but it's the same opinion, right? He's anti-vax. He doesn't want to get the vaccine. He doesn't think it's.
Well, that's why I say I don't knock somebody for his opinion. Different. You know, it's we all live a different life, have different perspectives, and I totally respect that and always will. It's when you encourage others to engage in risky behavior as opposed to this is the decision I'm making for myself. Here's the accommodations I'm making. Very different things. When you have a gentleman saying, I want to fill a stadium with people, I just don't want to see your faces covered and I don't care what happens. All right, fuck you, dude. You know, but when you look at the Kirk Cousins thing, he's like, listen, it's not for me, it's not where my head's at, but here's what I'm doing to take precautions. I care about my teammates, care about myself, and I'm consulting with my doctor. At the end of the day, all we can do when it comes to medical decisions is consult with our doctor. And so it's one of those things where, I will always respect that decision. But when it comes to, if he was like, you know what, all you fans come down for a signing, but if none of you wear masks,
that's the only way you can cough in every one of your mouths.
Yes, that's much different to me. And so that's where the words and actions, Clapton saying one thing and Cousins is not only doing his own thing, but he's saying it in a much different way where it's not like, I don't care if somebody's anti-vax. That's their thing, and it may not be my thing. And I'm not living their life. I'm not walking in their shoes. I know many people who can't. So he's taking a more respectful, responsible way to it as opposed to Eric Clapton giving a middle finger to anybody trying to be safe. So,
yeah, and I just wanted to highlight that because I do think words are important too, and so when your words are dangerous, I think that's just as important. But yeah, I just wanted to highlight that.
Well, I've also looked at it a lot. Like we talk about Eminem and how Greg mentioned like the gay marriage thing and all that stuff. Eminem was painted as like a bigot and a homophobic individual at one point, and then he had that performance with Elton John where he's like, "Fuck you," and like, where art doesn't always imitate life. Art sometimes is the character you portray, and so that's why I think it's important to kind of look at the actions of it all as opposed to just the words. And I know that sounds so basic, but there is a lot of layers to that.
Yeah, and I think as far as like the words, the small things can make a difference. I mean, I mentioned it in Cool Points this week, but the drummer from Offspring is no longer with the band because he medically cannot get the vaccine. With vaccine mandates going more and more the way of venues, which is how it should be, he's not going to be with the band. Like he's not going to be recording with them. He's not going to be touring with them. He said he'd only mentioned it so that if you were a fan of Offspring, you've seen them multiple times and they're like, oh, what happened to, I forget the guy's name. then you know he's not there for a reason. And he went on and said, hey, this is a decision I had to make medically for myself, and I respect the guys and their decision. It was the right decision. And like, that's just it. Like, even that subtle thing, if he never said, hey, the guys made the right decision, it's a completely different thing. But he's acknowledging that, yes, even though medically he can't get the vaccination, the guys are right not to have him touring and exposing potential strains to the population. So,
well, you know, there's that. And then
there.
Clapton said he got sick after he got the vaccine. Okay, you know, I'm not going to knock his own history, but that's a personal experience. And, you know, to take that to one step further, you know what? Fuck it all. Like, that's,
yeah,
that for me, it's like, geez, because like you could tell that there's a little bit of saltiness in the Offspring thing, but God, they've been together since 1988. So yeah, of course there's going to be some saltiness of like, here we go, you know, this is not right. And as I said earlier, we're all over it. We're all over this shit in various ways. We are, but it doesn't mean it's over us. And so musical venues are a very spiritual place, regardless of where you come from. I've been at concerts and festivals with every walk of life, every individual, whether they agree with me or not. In that moment, we are together, our spirits are colliding, and we are enjoying an experience. And if you have an experience where you're not only willing to, but encouraging people to put themselves in danger in order to interact with you, you no longer give a shit about your fans. You're just a selfish fucking asshole. And so that's where I draw the line with Eric Clapton. And so fuck him. I actually wiped him off all my playlists I had him on because that was enough for me. You know, I don't care if maybe he had a bad experience. I'm sorry to hear about that. Sorry to hear about the tragedy in his life. But when you're not just saying I had a bad experience, it's not for me, but you're saying, hey, it's not for you either. Come see me. That's where I draw the line. And so, you know, I really, especially in my line of work, I accept every opinion, mindset, whether I agree with it or not, or believe with it or jive with it. I will respect somebody's beliefs until it infringes upon somebody's safety. And that's where I draw the line. And so when we have musicians who have put somebody in danger, have harmed other people, have gone out of their way to diminish somebody else's experience or bully them or anything like that, that's where I draw the line, especially if they didn't try to rehabilitate any of it. You know, we have some musicians who have said things and been like, oh shit, I was wrong. Some who have grown up, we've watched many musicians grow up. When we were kids, they were teenagers and we've watched them evolve. And so you also have that. So I'm not one to write somebody off for the rest of their life, but if they're, what is Eric Clapton fucking 72 or something right now? If they're that old, they know better. Fuck them. So that's kind of where I draw the line. Or if you touch children, you're never going to be in my conversation. So I guess where we draw it is it's a case by case thing. And I know not everybody sees it that way. I also have the conversations of, do you separate the artist from the art? For me, no, because the art is an extension of them. And when they're singing about these individuals, how old is that individual? What did they do to that individual? I can't get that out of my head. And so, no, I cannot listen to that and separate it. So that's kind of where I am.
I think this is on a movie podcast because how do you separate an actor from a movie they did 2 decades ago? Like,
I've been a guest on a couple of those podcasts when talking about trauma and PTSD. But
I think that conversation's even harder to have, because how do you separate Kevin Spacey from Seven?
I don't.
And can you go back and appreciate it for what, you know, Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman are doing in it, and still appreciate the movie and try to? But anyway, we're not a movie podcast, but I think it's easier to do it with musicians, right? Because they're so ingrained in that thing. Yeah. They are, for a lot of these individuals, like we talked about Maynard, like he is the biggest part of or the most recognizable part of both Tool and A Perfect Circle. So like, there's such an intrinsic link between those that it's much easier to say, yep, well, I'm never listening to Hook again because John's an ass. But actors and how much production there is and how many people are involved with a movie.
I mean, at the same time, I'm an asshole. I know a lot of assholes. I'm friends with assholes. I can deal with assholes. I just can't deal with scumbags. And so that's kind of where it's
and I think with music, it's kind of interesting too, because with the exception of R. Kelly, everyone we've mentioned is like the contributing factor. They are the songwriter. They are the lyricist. Whereas R. Kelly's the singer, but he's not the producer. For the most part, he's not the writer. But I mean, his crimes are so egregious.
But we also found out his entire team was enabling everything throughout the process. So that's where it's like, no, you can't have any of my dimes or my pennies.
Well, and that goes kind of back to the Manson thing. I mean, like Wes Borland said, oh yeah, no, I knew the whole time. That's why I quit touring with him. Like, why the fuck didn't you say anything, Westmoreland? Like
Even
that
Twiggy
kind of-
Ramirez, where they had their split, and Manson's like, "Well, it's because he's an asshole," and Twiggy's like, "No, it's because I called him out for abuse." You know, like it's
yeah, like where was that Rolling Stone? And to be honest with you, who knows? Manson sold a lot of magazine covers, so maybe Twiggy wrote to an editor at Rolling Stone, and they shut him down. And so like Twiggy.
Well, there were the videos of Manson throwing baloney at naked women on his tour videos, and they were being sold at Hot Topic as like, "Wow, this is Manson's out of control videos." Like it was there for everybody to see. It's just it never looked consensual either. It's just it was before we had those conversations. And in Spin Magazine, I remember reading about how he had these parties and people would laugh it off. And it's just like, well, if it's normal here, because I'm reading this as like an 11, 12-year-old, if it's normal there, I guess, yeah, it's normal. Let me put on my t-shirt. You know, my Portrait of an American Family t-shirt. And here we are. Yay, go to church.
Well, and what a strange time too, because that was like the height of Jerry Springer. That was the Girls Gone Wild video. Snoop Dogg had a Girls Gone Wild video, and you want to believe that's all consensual and above board, but most of those women are drunk, so it can't be consensual.
Correct.
So I mean, like, what a weird time we've lived in. And I think that goes to like something like Superbad. Superbad's a brilliant movie, but the F word, the bad F word is thrown out there so much throughout that movie.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, like that was a funny R-rated comedy word at the time. Like that movie today would not have those words. I have that kind of faith in Rogen and Goldberg as writers. I have that kind of faith in Jonah Hill as an actor. I mean, definitely Michael Cera as an actor. Like, so they wouldn't be throwing that derogatory word around like they did then.
Well, you know, I showed Garden State my first semester teaching my mental health class because it deals with a lot of mental health stuff. The soundtrack is top notch and it's got great performances. But I remember sitting through it because it was one of my favorite movies, and I'm listening to the dialogue because I hadn't watched it in about 5-6 years. I'm like, what the fuck? Like, I would never condone the use of many of the words used in there or even statements, and they weren't in context. Like, it was just bullshit dialogue and very amateur and childish. And so, I guess as I grew, I started to be aware of things too, like even showing that where I'm like, what the fuck? I can't show this. And I asked the class, I'm like, do you want me to turn this off? They're like, no, we're into it. And so I stopped. I'm like, listen, I don't condone any of this. It's a movie I fell in love with years ago. I probably should have watched it before showing it to you again, because I would not allow anybody to use this language in my classroom, let alone a lesson I'm teaching. And then we had that discussion, you know, about boundaries, respect, and growth, and all that stuff too. But it's one I took the L on. They loved the movie, unfortunately. I did introduce them to Carey Brothers, so that's the saving grace because he's such a great musician. But you know, it's one of those things where I hadn't seen it forever, forgot about it, and somehow the language didn't bother me when I watched it as a 20-year-old. You know, so it's.
I mean, I did the same thing with Spaceballs. I showed it's a classic in the space world because it just spoofs on space stuff. But there's a lot of not okay stuff, right? The one stormtrooper combing the desert is speaking Ebonics and is using a hair pick instead of a comb like the others. Like, that's when the first time I ever watched Spaceballs, that didn't occur to me how many Drewish jokes they make.
Yeah.
And it's like,
although with Mel Brooks, I think that's kind of par for the course and expected with him, and
sure,
much more tolerated, I think, because of where it was coming from.
Sure.
But at the same time, how much does that normalize?
Oh, no, you're not wrong. You're not wrong. I feel like we can do an entire show on this stuff.
Luckily, the reverse side happened. My class actually hated that movie, but they waited until 10 minutes before it was over to tell me they weren't enjoying it. They're like, well, if you told me that an hour ago, we would have turned this shit off. I'm not enjoying it anymore. Like, there's a couple quotable lines I still love, like the "I'm a Mog, half man, half dog. I'm my own best friend" will always be hilarious to me. But there's a lot that just does not hold up anymore. But again, it's like 40 years old, right? So,
I mean, fuck, we had a song 17 trend, you know, back in the day where she's only 17 or she's my cherry pie. You know, we have all this shit because how the times are. And it doesn't make them okay. It just means that we evolve as we grow. And, you know, when you start to listen to all these songs about, I mean, how many of these 70s hair bands wanted to fuck teenagers? You know, it's disgusting, but those were the hits when you really listen to these tracks. And so I know for a fact many of us have listened to them over the years, and it's not until we get as a dad now, I hear things much differently too. It's not until many years later we're like, that's really fucking grimy and cringy, and I remember banging out to it in my car, you know. So it's really interesting.
Well, and even like if you, what is it? Is it Pinkerton? Is that the Weezer album that has a lot of to do with the young Japanese girl pen pal River Como had?
Mhm.
Thankfully, always been my least favorite Pinkerton album, and like nothing like inappropriate happened. But the fact that River Como had a pen pal that was a young Japanese girl is creepy and probably should be discussed more.
But with him, I feel like it was innocent. No, I don't know. There's so much just cringe over the years, so it's been difficult on some of the lists, but it's one of those things where I'm like, I could look past certain things and get to it, but there's also certain musicians who I've just written off and they have no place in my life. Like Stephen Jenkins is a piece of shit, but Third Eye Blind is one of my favorite bands, and I love his songwriting. And so,
Yeah.
I can take the asshole. I just can't take.
Well, and it's interesting because
certain
Eve
stuff.
6 was mentioned, 60 songs that define the 90s. The frontman from Eve 6 was on to talk about Third Eye Blind and what an asshole Stephen Jenkins is. And Stephen Jenkins literally walked up to him a show multiple at different occasions. Once told him he had no talent, and the other time told him he fucked his girlfriend. So he has every reason to hate Stephen Jenkins, and he does as a person, but praised him as a musician.
Yeah,
So
classic Stephen Jenkins
is an asshole, but like, I mean, he had consensual sex with the girlfriend. So like, yes, that's a personal wrong, but not
yeah.
not something super above board, but not something like beyond despicable. Like we all
I'm
have
happy to
friends
say
who
that.
cheated on someone. So
I'm happy to say that I think there's probably like 10 artists who would potentially make any of our lists moving forward that won't make my cuts, and the rest of them I don't foresee. So, and we're moving into my Sarah Bareilles and Colby Kelly years, and so none of everybody else matters. So, but gentlemen, we're back. We're heading into 2001. We are joined by my buddy Jeff.
We're back
Ward
with more tangents.
hey, I saved it for the end in case someone didn't want to listen to it. They could have cut out after we talked music. But if you did listen to it, thank you. I think it's always an important dialogue to talk about this stuff because I don't believe in cancel culture, but I believe in talking about accountability. And with most of these artists we've talked about, there's not real accountability. I know R. Kelly got into legal trouble, but like he's still fucking played on the radio somehow. So like how much real accountability is there in this? And I think it's an important conversation. So
I will say I was riding in the car with a friend, and this was last year, I think, and R. Kelly popped up on his playlist and he kind of gave me the side eye, like, sorry. But it was one of those things, like I said, you do you. I'm riding in your car, you're driving, we don't have to have that discussion. It's just he's not going to pop up on mine, just so kind of thing. But as we dive into 2001, we will see a giant shift between pop, rock, and hodgepodge or Mod Podge, whichever you prefer. For me, Mod Podge is more of an Art Deco thing where I will glue many comic book pages to a fan blade. So I look forward to seeing you guys next week. It's been fun to reunite. Joseph, again, congratulations on the wedding. Anybody got anything to plug this week?
we are back with No Coast Defenders. It's up on Spotify and the YouTubes right now over at Gregory Dilcox on YouTube because I haven't changed it back to Cool Points TV. I should do that eventually. Last week posted My Friends Like Cool Shit over on my YouTube with my sister. You commented on it today, Dan. Really fun conversation that I recorded forever ago, but waited until we actually were able to see her in person to post it. Love my sister. And then just a Cool Points newsletter. Follow me on Facebook where I will share any update. My plan was to start writing more for there, and then I went and decided to get a second job and work overnights. So it'll be a struggle to write any more than the weekly Cool Points, but I'll still be doing that.
Joseph, what do you got, my friend?
I'm not sure if I've got anything. Big shout out to everyone who helped prepare the wedding. Gregory had a big hand in getting things prepared. Amy and Ronnie were here as friends, photographers, and helped set up a bunch of stuff. I don't know if Amy, for her photography, has a website. I don't think so. I haven't seen one, but if there is, wherever this video gets posted, I will have a link.
She does not have a photography website because it's more of a hobby she's building a portfolio on, but she is AE Wooler on Instagram, mostly just shows, that she posts. Like she's only ever done weddings in the capacity of friends. This is the closest thing she's done to a professional thing. But her and Ronnie were some of the most professional photographers I've ever seen in a situation in which they were here as friends photographing a wedding. But like they were fantastic. But yeah, she's A Wooler on Instagram if you want to see some of her photos, including she posted some pictures of her sister's like baby announcement when her sister was pregnant, and she waded through a fucking lake to get the perfect pictures of her sister. Like that's the kind of dedication she has as a photographer. So
You know what?
I'm excited to see like her take more of this. She's in education, and that's a brilliant field, as Dan can attest to. But I do think she's got a photography skills and a beautiful artistic mind. So I would love to see her do more of this.
So I post this on Instagram as well. So tag her on it when we post videos so that she can get anybody coming in on that too, because we have a lot of IG people. I'd like to give a shout out to Mad Batters Pastries in Hudson Valley, New York.
They get the double shout out.
They do. They're going to get a shout out every episode this week. Offering gluten-free treats, and they also ship. Family-owned business. I love family-owned businesses. I want to see them thrive, but also gluten-free. I've had a lot of friends recently try to go gluten-free and can't find it locally. It's a small New York business. They will ship right to you. Do it up. Tim and I shot our, I don't know what kind of finale to call it, but we recorded today. We'll post Thursday. Our MCU journey finale for now, where we discussed Loki. So that will be up on Thursday morning. And Greg and I are going to be doing the what ifs on No Coast Defenders. So enjoy it all, take it all in. But most importantly, Free Comic Book Day is coming up on next weekend. Hit up your local comic shop, even if you're not a normal comic person. Stop in, pop in, see what you can get. There's probably something music related. I know there are many bands and musicians who actually have comic books out, including Jimmy Eat World. They have their own graphic novel out right now. So definitely check it out. And we'll be back with 2001 next week, featuring my buddy Jeff Warden, who will probably be bringing a solid ska take to it, as that is his genre of choice. And we'll also be having some guests, I think, along the way, and we'll talk about that more. But gentlemen, it's great to be back together. It's been a blast. And we've got some playlists to build now.
Yeah, and now that no one's watching anymore, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share.
All right, gentlemen, you have a great night.
See you, Dan.